yeah, and then you keep that in, don't you? And it sounds a bit rubbish, but anyway, welcome to this episode of the Manchester SEO podcast. Today we have Anne Bach with us. Hello, thank you for joining us. You can tell us a bit more about us in a second, but Anne is a sports psychologist amongst many other things, and the company is called the Or Hub. There we go. Mind went blank just at the wrong time. And you help athletes transition from being in the limelight as a professional athlete through to retirement, which sounds amazing. Anyway, I'm waffling now. So, Anne, thanks for coming in. Tell us a bit more about you.
Yeah, well, I've always been involved in sport. So, started out as a PE teacher and taught for a few years up in Scotland. Got into sport myself, so I was a volleyball player. Played that up to a good level. But I found sports psychology in my final term of my undergrad, right, and was like, oh, I like this. So kind of had it in my head, right, I'm going to go and study that. So I did. When I turned 30, moved down to England, did my masters, and was just really fortunate from very early on. Got working with some GB teams, got working with some GB players and athletes, etc., and went to world championships, and this was all within about the first 2 or 3 years, so really fortunate from that side. And then took on my own business, personal development, went into the business side of things, and that was very different. I'd kind of come from education and academia, so suddenly bursting into the business world was a bit scary and kind of a massive learning curve, but really good. A totally different speed, which I really loved. And it's all kind of evolved to now through kind of helping folk with the sports management, working with the sports psychology still, and now helping the athletes retire.
Do you remember the occasion where it lit a spark in your brain for the psychology of sport? You know, I presume that was when you were playing, that something happened that you thought, oh, okay, I'm really interested in this.
It was actually at the undergrad, because we did one term of it. So and there was one day where the lecturer, the lecture was 9 o'clock in the morning, so we were already waiting, being the angels that we were. And one of the admin assistants had popped her head in saying, listen, the lecturer's going to be late, and can we meet, take a half-hour break, go get a coffee, meet again at 9:30. We're like, yeah, that's cool. So 9:30 we came in, and he was all ready, and off we went, sort of thing. But he explained that he'd been caught in traffic, he'd been caught, there was a real hold up. He knew he'd get there for 9:15, but he wanted to give him a chance to be able to calm down, get himself into the right state. And he also wanted to get a buy-in and an agreement from us to make sure that we were okay with it as well. So from both sides, we were starting from an even playing field, rather than him rushing in late, us being hacked off that he'd kept us waiting, etc. And that was a massive lesson. I kind of went, I like this. There's something about this kind of psychology thing that is really interesting. And he worked with the Scottish Rugby at that point. Back in the days when we were good, then we were rubbish, and now we're good again. So there was just a whole load of things, but that really stuck out to me. Yeah, it's always stuck with me, even now when I go to meetings. If there's ever got to be any point where I've got to say, listen, apologies, I get the agreement from the other side, so we start from the same place. Yeah,
I always remember watching the World Snooker Championships in the late 80s, and Steve Davis was the main guy at that point, and was winning everything. And they used to talk about how he had the psychological advantage over him because he didn't show any emotions, never looked like he was under pressure. And then you've got Alex Higgins who was doing what he was doing, and Jimmy White who you could see it in the faces, and he knew he had the advantage over them psychologically, and that kind of, I always thought then, and took it into sport at that age to try not to show whether I was tired, or I just found it fascinating.
Yeah. I remember watching, obviously Stephen Hendry fan,
of course,
coming from the Scottish side, but I watched a lot of tennis as well when I was younger, and it's my kind of original role model was Martina Navratilova, because for me she kind of changed women's sport, but there was a real psychological part and there was the real physical part as well, so I loved that combo. So
so you were in Scotland, you then decided to do a postgrad in psychology, and then what happened then? What was the
Well, I actually went on to do a PhD, which was a strange experience. It was kind of in education and psychology, set in a PE department, so I thought, this should work. It kind of didn't, and again, when you go through a process, you get to the end of it and you kind of go, how was that? And for me, it was a terrible experience. I didn't have a PhD by the end of it. It had been quite a rough experience. And actually leaving, I kind of felt I had nothing to show for 3 years of running a project, working and studying, etc. I remember having an exit interview with my head of department, who was just amazing. And he kind of went, so how did it go? And I literally was, this is terrible. I've got nothing out of it. And he said, but what have you learned? And he took me through all the different things that I'd learned, the different skills I'd picked up, etc. And actually that exit interview again was just something that made me then be able to look back and appreciate where I'd got to by then, my new skills I'd picked up, the things I could then take it forward to use. So that was quite an interesting little chunk. And then, as I say, took over the personal development business and kind of went into the big wide business world.
So timing wise, we have European football championships coming up, and we have Olympic Games, massive events for athletes, sports people, and like you said before we started, that's when usually people retire. And I'm interested in how it came about that you thought, I can help these people, because it can be really tough, can't it, when you retire and you go from being full-time athletes and all the training and the routine and the if you're any good, I suppose, the adulation and the crowd. How did it all come about where you thought, this could be a business, or this is something I'm interested in and I can help people?
It was kind of part of what I was doing with the coaching anyway. So working with high performance, helping athletes kind of find sponsorship, and also helping them once they got to the end, because I figured, right, if we help them during the career, it also makes sense to help them afterwards as well. And there'd been some high profile folk losing their lives. Now that for me is just mind blowing, how somebody can go from being in such a like you said, a place of adulation, high status, they've got supporters, they've got fans, and then to get to a point where they can't see a way forward, or they're not able to share what's going on with them, and then for them to unfortunately die by suicide is just heartbreaking. And that was one of the things. There'd been a few different occurrences. There was the Welsh manager, there was some footballers, and I just looked at it and thought, I've got to be part of a solution here. There's definitely different bodies helping. You see athletes and sports people now coming out of the sport and maybe setting up addiction charities or helping with, mental health and mindset, etc. And I just thought I need to be part of this solution, because to kind of go to that extent where that's the end result, nobody should have to go through that, whether it's sport or any part of any walk of life.
For people that don't know, you think, well, they've had a great career, they should be enjoying themselves, and it seems really bizarre is a really bad word for it, but it's bizarre that someone would then be at such a low that they would then take their lives from that.
Yeah, we never truly know, obviously, what's going on with anybody, and that's the whole thing. And I think we've got more of a kind of environment, and maybe there's more people beginning to realise that they can speak out. We've got maybe groups that are starting to happen where you've got men's football that is that's around mental health. You've got different areas where at least folk can go and start to open up, but that's not always been the case, and I'd say that's maybe only the last 4 or 5 years that started coming through a bit more.
Yeah, I suppose mental health is spoken about quite a lot more these days, isn't it?
Absolutely.
There is obviously some sports where there is support available from bodies like I suppose in football, the Players Association seems to be
PFA,
quite,
yeah.
And I know there's a similar one with cricket, I think. I was listening to another podcast, and Callum Wilson, one of the Callum Smith, one of the Smith brothers, who are world champion boxers. I think his older brother Paul's trying to start up a similar thing for boxers, because but boxing is definitely something where you see that people struggle to retire, or they retire and then they come back, and it's such it's a sport that can be really damaging for health, as everyone knows, and you always think, why have you come back to get punched in the face?
No, I think when you're talking about why do you come back and want to get punched in the face again, it really is a great question, because why do they? And a lot of the time it's either maybe they feel as though they've not completed everything, there's still something there, or they just miss that buzz, that high, that kind of the training and then the actual competing, or there's something going on that there's maybe something's not been quite achieved. So maybe that's one of the things as well. But it is an interesting one where you sometimes look at the matchup, if it's boxing, etc., where it could be and it could be money. That can be a big draw as well from that side.
Yeah, money, the buzz, whether you feel you've achieved what you wanted to, I suppose, is a big thing for some sports. And I always find it fascinating, what is it that makes people behave in a certain way, whether that's in business or with sport, or what makes you perform on one day but not on another, especially with cricket, which is kind of the only sport I play these days. It's 95% in the brain for performance, and it's fascinating. So how do you help the athletes? What's the kind of process that you tend to go through with them?
It's finding out about them. Everybody is a human at the base, whether it's within sport or wherever else. We're human beings. Yeah. So finding out about the person, finding out about what's got them to now, because I always think that we've got our conscious and our subconscious, and I kind of like to think about it. We think the conscious is in charge, but if you think of it as a plate and a baked bean on the plate, the conscious is like the baked bean and the plate is like the subconscious. So the baked bean is not in charge. The plate is in charge. Yeah. So finding out what's going on in the subconscious is really interesting. For me, I kind of put the detective hat on, and you find out what's going on, and I think we get clues from our speech, what folk tell us. We get clues from the language, how folk say things, maybe words that creep out that they don't realise they're saying, but that can give you some patterns. And so you kind of build up a picture. You build up a picture of how they've got to that point. And then you kind of help them explore where they want to get to. Often with sport, you're finishing anything between 24 and 39 sort of thing. It's quite unusual for top level sport to go past 40. And that's still a whole career to go after that. You've got a long time to still be creating things and maybe starting something new, or starting a business, going into a job, into work, whatever. So figuring out what they really want to do, for me, is so key, because at that point, some sports people, when they finish, there's the chance that they think they've only got a few options, and one of them is to stay in their sport because that's what they've always done, or is to just go and get a job because they don't have an awful lot of too many ideas of what the breadth of what they can actually do, and actually all the stuff that they've achieved during their sports career, all the skills they've built up, all the techniques they've built up, all of those are transferable, and helping them explore all of that.
Transferable skills.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it, how we talk about a lot with on other episodes where what is it from someone's childhood that makes them good at what they do now in business, and it can be the wildest things that they that makes them competitive, or do you have anything from your upbringing that you think that you like it, that gives you the drive to do what you do now? Is there anything that's transferable from those times, do you think?
Wow. I do think you're right. There's stuff from kids, like as kids we come up with these ideas. We want to be an astronaut, or we want to be a doctor, or you used to make these cardboard maybe spaceships or something. Kids play when they're little, and that's when these ideas all come out. The best one I ever heard, when I asked what did you want to be as a kid, somebody said an orangutan, so that was really nice. But you've just got all these different ideas, and as we go on through kind of school into high school and further on, some folk will achieve those dreams, and that's when it's really strong. They've got the skills. I think they've got the skills to then take them where they want to go. They've got that motivation. They've maybe got the support network as well. They're kind of in that right place to be. Those bits line up. If you've got an amazing talent, I'm thinking sport, for example, as a kid, and you never meet the right coaches, or you never are involved in the right teams, or you never quite get picked up, there's a chance that talent goes to waste. And I think that's the same in any part of what we do. If you're a really bright kid, but you maybe get caught up in the wrong environment in the school, or you don't quite get the opportunities, or you don't make the most of the opportunities, then it could be years before you reach your potential, or you maybe don't in the end. So I think there's a whole range of bits there that kind of allow for that potential to be met. But I also think we've got the potential that we have can be expressed in different ways. And for sports people, I think that is just one expression of their genius, of their purpose. So the idea then after that is to figure how else can they still get contentment, excitement, etc. from their world, but it's still those bits running through. For me, I love helping people reach where they want to get to. I love helping people empower themselves. So that's come from early. It must come from parents. It's come from my school. It's come from my environment. Yeah, there's so many bits.
Bryn Thompson, who set up Pareto sales training part of the business, which is huge now, and he's been in sales training for years in sales positions, and he said he was the youngest of 4 boys, and so there was competition and everything, who could get the most food and eat the quickest, and if you weren't quick then there'd be none left, and then it's playing football and having that real drive not to be to be better than his brothers just drove him on, and that went into his work and his sales life, and the motivations to keep doing something and being good at it.
My dad played, he was a golfer. My mum and dad both played badminton, so I was exposed to sport early on, and it was. Yeah, I used to go we used to go and play golf when I was little. From Scotland, you have to. It's the rules. Yeah. And also badminton, I played that from very early on. Yeah. So I was involved around sport from early, but I used to choose to sit on my denim beanbag, child of the 70s, in front of it used to be the Five Nations at that point, yeah. Four and Five Nations, watching the rugby by myself. My mum was upstairs, my dad was out playing golf, so there was something in me even at that point that I loved sport. I loved the Olympics from early on, so there was something about seeing people trying the hardest, reaching a pinnacle and sort of winning that absolutely attracted me from early on. So yeah.
And you find that in business world as well, where what gets, especially in sales, if you get promoted to be a manager, the skill set to get there is very different from the managerial skill set to coach sales people under you and support them and help them grow. They're very different, aren't they? I suppose that's something you find a lot with the clients that you sit with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of talk about where have they come from. I use loads of analogies in what I do. That's how my brain works. And I use a jigsaw analogy for this. So we have this jigsaw that's there, and this is made up of the picture of where we are, who we are up to that point. Yeah. Most of the bits are the right bits. Some bits are maybe from other jigsaws or old jigsaws. Some are maybe back to front. But on the whole, the picture's there. And the idea is then to figure, well, what do you want that picture to grow into? So there's loads of skills people already have, and it's finding the gaps then that maybe they need in order to take it to the next stage. So if it was a manager or somebody going... from teaching, if you look at it from when I was teaching, you've got a teacher that goes then maybe to head of department. They're amazing teachers. They're fantastic at what they do. And you're right, to make that jump into almost a different beast is quite difficult unless you get the coaching or the training or the education alongside. So with that picture, you look at, well, what are the gaps that are needing to be filled, trained, etc., in order for you to be able to expand that picture to take you to that next stage. So for athletes, that's a big part of what they do. They've got loads of these transferable skills, like we were saying, but there's going to be areas that they need to improve on. And for me, attitude is the fundamental. If you come with the attitude that you're open to learning, you are, you've got that sort of growth mindset, then I think you can teach most people most things. What do they used to say? Used to hire on aptitude and fire on attitude. Yeah. And I think you hire on attitude as well now. Yeah.
Is there any bit of advice you would give to an athlete that's thinking about retirement?
start preparing now. Think now. I would almost start saying to athletes as soon as they get into what they're doing, have a look at the big picture. It's not just the competing, it's also what you do when you're away from the pitch or the track, etc. What is your world looking like? How is your finances looking? How can you start to prepare those? What other skills maybe do you want to learn? What do you want to do alongside? Even the top level footballers, athletes, etc. do not train 9 hours a day, 6 days, 7 days a week. There's loads of chunks of time where they've got areas that they can explore other things, and I really do think that there's opportunities to learn, to grow, to try things, to get involved with other things. Start doing that while you're competing.
Prepare for retirement while you're still there.
Yeah, maybe we need to come up maybe with a different term. I don't know, but it's you're kind of prepping for the future.
Yeah.
Future proofing maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting subject because there's so many variables, isn't there? Because they could be, perhaps you are competing, you have the option of preparing for retirement and for the life after, or occasionally you can be let go, or you can get an injury that means you can't compete anymore, or you miss a window or of opportunity. I suppose it's different for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, the psychology is different for each of them as well.
Yeah.
You know, the difference of being injured and think something just finishing overnight, that's full on. You know, it's almost like the death of a dream at that point, which you go through grieving. In most of them anyway, you go through a grieving process. I saw a quote, but it was Hannah Miley, who the Scottish swimmer, and she said it's not just an event retirement, it's a process. And I thought it's a really good way of looking at it. And actually they say it's about 2 years is the average for most athletes to kind of get their head round, to get everything sorted for moving on after that moment of retirement. So having those different things in mind and having that sort of wider identity, etc., does help with that.
It's interesting they say that for grief as well. In a couple of years, I suppose it's a similar thing really, where life changes quite significantly.
Yeah, and going back to the injury side, you know, if you suddenly stop, as I say, overnight, and you don't have something in plan, not only are you trying to recover and trying to rehabilitate, but you're also trying to get your head around, crap, what do I do now, sort of thing. So there's just then so much going on that's when overwhelm hits, and often when we get overwhelmed, that puts us into a state of not being able to do anything. So we get stuck. So yeah.
So do you have any advice for people wanting to get into sports psychology?
Yeah, go do your research. There's different pathways. So for sports psychology, I did it as a master's. I'd already done my undergrad in PE. To go on afterwards, there's different bodies that a lot of folk, when you become accredited to. So you've got the BPS, which is the British Psychological Society, and you've also got BASES, which is the British Association of Sport and Exercise Scientists. Whew, the brain work there. So when you become accredited to them, it gives you opportunities to call yourself a sports psychologist, and to it quite often opens up job opportunities as well within maybe governing bodies or UK sport and different areas like that. What I would say is, to become accredited, there's different pathways, but they do like you to have an undergrad that's accredited, and then a master's that's accredited, and then you go and find out, you go and kind of complete your own experience. I didn't have an undergrad that was accredited, so they have got a different pathway now where you can use your own experience, you can use working with teams, etc., to go towards that.
Okay.
But it makes it easier, I think, if you've got that pathway that it's everything is on that accredited sort of board.
Yeah.
So that would be the thing. Go find accredited courses.
Same. But so we first met networking event.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember in my mind the first time that we'd met, and I think you might have been doing some kind of what do they call it?
Foresight.
A foresight. Yeah. And it stuck with me because it was basically was it 10 songs, 10, and you used that as a way of the kind of rules to live by, or your rules to live by, and it was fascinating. But you've been involved in networking for a long time, haven't you?
Years, yeah. I do remember going in early days, not long after I'd just started up. I'd taken over the personal development business, so it was about 2006, 2007. And I remember going in and felt so like a duck out of water. It was one of the scariest things walking into that room at that point. And it was kind of the days where there was still like pinstripe suits and there wasn't as many women in the room doing the networking. And I remember walking in just not knowing how to strike up a conversation or how to, like, there was little groups of folk, and you go, how do you kind of introduce or kind of slide into that group? And so you kind of got a cup of tea and stood in the corner and just prayed that somebody would come and speak to you. And but it definitely got better. And we talked about foresighting, that it was for networking, and I think I joined that about 2009, and I'd been part of a business for breakfast or something like that for a year or so before that. So I found breakfast meetings where you sat at a table and at least you had somebody either side of you was a bit less scary. So I kind of went down that route for a long time.
It can be scary, can't it?
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing a little 30 seconds, explanation of who you are and what you do and all that. You must have used some of your knowledge on how to stay calm in those situations and say something that is what you want to say and meaningful as to what you want to do, rather than just twittering on like we've all done at some point.
It's because the brain just goes into that panic. It's fight or flight at that point, and quite often the mouth goes dry and the palms get sweaty and there's like the butterflies in the stomach, and it's that almost that dry mouth, and also the oh my goodness, what am I going to say? So either nothing comes out, or you're speaking at 10 times the speed. You sit down and you kind of say to yourself, oh man, I forgot to say that and that. So preparation is the key, and that's the preparation for that is also the preparation that I would work with athletes for going into sport, etc. But it's all that kind of what you do beforehand to get yourself into a state that will give you the best opportunity to perform at your best and actually get the mind flowing. It's relaxing the mind's even before this, like speaking to you today, it was a kind of a few deep breaths and actually consciously just relaxing the mind and just allowing it to go, you've got this, you know exactly what you're going to say. Once you relax, it will come out, but it does take a bit of practice.
It certainly does. I've talked about this a lot. I quite like the excitement of winging things, which comes out in negative ways sometimes. And I find that networking groups, I see the same person every week or every month, and they say exactly the same thing that I know they're going to say, and that annoys me. Because you kind of know what's going to happen, and I feel like it's kind of wasting my time on the planet. In a very extreme version of it. It's my psychology coming out in spades. And the fact I like to kind of just stand up and go, well, yeah, this is what I do, this is who I am, I quite like that because it comes out differently every time. I think it's more human.
It's the authentic side, isn't it? Yeah. You've always been very human. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But no, there is something about that where, and they talk about, and I'm going back to sport here, where they talk about being in the zone or flow state. And it is that part where you allow the brain to just do what it needs to do. If I cast my mind way back, we've got like a really deep-seated part of the brain and then the slightly newer part. Now the deep-seated part where we don't need words for that, so we go into, within sport you just do it.
Yeah.
So that's I love the Nike term, like just do it. It is literally what we do. We go into this flow state. Whereas as soon as we start going past the speech part of the brain, it slows everything down a fraction. And that's why when we start talking to ourselves, or we start kind of having that self-talk when we're competing, it slows folk down. And that's when, you know, things can maybe start to go wrong, or we start talking ourselves out. And it's also why when you get to the end of something and somebody says to you, so how was that? And you go, I don't remember. I can't, because you don't have the words to describe it, because you actually weren't going past any word part of your brain. So there's been points where I've done it. I remember playing where I've stepped out going, I do not know what happened there, but I played out my skin and it was amazing. But unless it had been videoed, I wouldn't have been able to remember what happened. And that's what athletes almost are striving for. And I remember doing it at a presentation as well. 45-minute presentation, got to the end of it, do not remember a thing that I did, but was getting rave reviews. So going into that flow and going into just letting the mind go, it's brilliant. But folk don't have the confidence to do that a lot of the time.
So flow state, being in the zone, it's also cool. It's something I'm deeply obsessed by, because it's a bit of a drug, and the more you reach for it, the less you get it, kind of thing. And when you're playing sport or you're in the office, you'll have days where you've done a day's work in a few hours, and you're like, I don't know how that happened. Everything just seemed to work. And you're playing cricket, it feels like the bowler's just bowling at the middle of your bat, and you know what's going to happen before it happens. And team sports like football, you feel like everyone's connected and you know what everyone's going to do, and it just flows beautifully. I'm a little bit obsessed by that and the processes that you go through, and it's really different depending on who you are. Sometimes you can start off an innings batting and it can be really, really tough, and you grind it out, and then suddenly it just lifts, and then you're in the flow state. And others, you're just there all the time. And I'm obsessed by it, as you can probably tell. Have you done any research into the flow state mentally, and how people get into it, and what goes on?
Yeah, a lot of what we do, we try and get folk into that state of just being ready. And again, it's kind of picking up the clues. So what have you done in the past that's led to you being ready, flowing, etc., etc.? So for me, that's where the preparation comes in. So what do you do beforehand that gets you into as close a state every single time? That means that you've got a better chance of going in. Have I done the full research? No. And I'm the same, it does interest me, but the kind of getting people into that initial state. So what do you do the week running up? Obviously you've had all the training preparation, but what do you do the week running up? What do you do a couple of days running up? When the anxiety maybe starts kicking in, the cognitive anxiety might start playing up in your mind. What are you doing the night before, the morning of, etc., etc. So when you get that as close as possible to a regular thing, you then are hopefully then going into the game in as similar a state as you can. And then obviously you've got like pre-performance routines for things like, you know, we think of Johnny Wilkinson with the clasped hands, looking up and down the post. He actually used to look for a granny in the stands, and that's what his aim was. He imagined a granny in the stands. Yeah. So when he looked up and down, looked for the granny, and then he would go and kick the ball. But that would get him into that state every single time, where it didn't matter if he was the final of the World Cup or playing for his team or whatever. It was as similar a state every single time. So the arousal state wasn't sending your mind through the roof, where it was quiet, you know, whatever state you needed to be in. And that again changes for every player. So you, compared to when your teammates, you might need a certain way of preparing in the changing rooms beforehand, whereas they're maybe jumping about daft listening to wild music, whereas I can't see that with you.
No, well, not before the game.
So it's finding all those clues, and it's real. Some of it's trial and error, you know, and you see sports people and athletes, they'll try things out during the season or maybe pre-season, etc., or at lesser comps where they're working on certain parts of what they do, so that when it just flows, it's you're almost like you kind of just take your foot off the gas and you just go, you know. So
routine, isn't it? It's finally a pre-routine for everything, pre-ball routine, pre-game. Even
for our day though, like how you start in the morning, how you end at night, you know, having those bookends for me that's something I definitely do with every client I work with, is what's your morning routine, what's your evening routine. So how do you start yourself off in the best way that's going to give you the best chance of having a good day? Things will always crop up. We're human, we're always going to respond, but then it's how do you bounce back, how do you you kind of recalibrate then, and the more you've kind of thought about this, worked through this, I think you recalibrate quicker. So
it's being conscious of unconscious behaviours, isn't it, and changing the I'm saying things that I've got no knowledge of, but for me it was always trying to be conscious of if I'm feeling a bit irritated or and then changing that around mentally. I always think the inner monologue, if you can make the inner monologue positive and be aware of it, you know, where especially maybe with batting and cricket, where things are feeling a little bit kind of tough and you think you're not timing the ball properly, and it's about, and your inner monologue goes negative. I can't do it, I'm struggling today, I just can't hit the ball, I can't, and I find if you change that to being more positive, then you don't get yourself out quite as much. But also in the day, in the office, with people, when you're dealing with people, how you deal with them is really important, isn't it?
Life would be so easy if we didn't have to deal with people, wouldn't it? It'd be amazing. But no, exactly what you're saying there. But almost taking sports people into a competition, for example, we might have a whole range of scenarios already thought out, planned out, so that if something was to crop up, there's a plan of action. So again, it's not taking up the brain space, because what we're trying to do is leave that processing space in the brain so that it's there for concentrating on the game, concentrating on the competition, etc. You're trying to take out all that extraneous stuff, so it maybe goes to the coach, or they've got plan C, or they go to that scenario. So we can do exactly the same, you know. It's if you have a bit of a crappy morning, are you going to leave the afternoon to be crap as well, or are you going to do something at lunchtime that resets you, going out for a walk, or kind of getting into nature, or something that you know resets you? And having almost those, I call them the topper uppers. What's your topper upper? What kind of tops up your energy? What allows you to kind of recalibrate, what allows you to sort of resettle, and having those ready and at hand, you go, oh yeah, right, I need to go and listen to maybe some music for 20 minutes, or I'm just going to sit in my car with my meditation for 10 minutes or something. Or you take yourself out of the situation, but that allows you to then step back in going, this is the state I want to be in, and off you go again. You're productive, or you doing whatever you need to do.
Interesting, isn't it? I was thinking of times where I've not been able to focus all day on something I need to do, and it's left to the very last moment because it's the urgency of it that then makes it, whereas if I just had a routine where I could go back and get myself focused again and start, it could have all been done without the stress. And
Absolutely. I love watching. Again, I'm a sports buff as well. I'm the same as you. I love watching sport. It's going to get to like the Olympics, and I call it research. Just watching the sport for 3 weeks. It gets to Wimbledon time, and my TV's green, and TV like Wimbledon and Euros at the same time. It's like nirvana. But you're always picking up things from experts and from champions. And I remember seeing one where Tiger Woods was at the Masters. He was on his downswing, and a bird flew in his periphery.
I've seen
and he pulled out of the swing and didn't hit the ball. Went off. Went through his pre-performance routine, stepped back up, and then hit it. So he had that presence of mind to know that something wasn't right, and that he needed to reset himself. Otherwise, he'd have shanked it, or done whatever would have happened with your attention going. So it's I love having that awareness. That initial awareness is what allows us to change. So awareness is good.
Had it on there. I was watching a game on Saturday, and the batsman thought there should have been a no ball. The ball was above waist height, and he came through him, and he was like this to the umpires, and he got himself a bit upset about it. In my head, I'm thinking this is a danger time for him,
totally
mentally, and then next ball hits it straight to a fielder and gets out, and it's that routine, going back into, okay, that's gone now, we need to forget about it and stay in and not get it. Happens so often, isn't it?
And you see it with goalies, you see it with anything where you've made a mistake. I see it sometimes in football or rugby. They've either passed the ball wrong, or they've made a mistake, and then you see the next action they take has come from that red mist place, where they've either slid in then for a really nasty tackle, or they've gone and retaliated, instead of being able to, you're right, switch that bit off, refocus, and then go again. And that has to be learned. There's not that many sports folk that will just have that naturally, because you're in a high pressure situation, so how do you deal with it? So having those learned kind of ways of being able to tune back in, or even like when your teammates coming over, just going, okay, head back in. Like I see it sometimes in some clubs where they've got buddy systems, which is amazing. So you maybe in a rugby team, you've got a buddy. So if they see the head dropping a little bit, or if they see them getting a bit fired up, it's just a little, they've got a word or a look or something that they just go, right, okay, head back in. And that's just enough to then kind of get them focused back in again.
I'm always a big fan of the role of someone having a mentor. You find that most of the England cricketers have someone from the school cricket master, or someone from the club that they'll call up if they're struggling. Remember Kevin Peterson going back to South Africa to his school, his coach, and then his next innings he got double 100 in Australia, and it's amazing how talking to someone that you trust and respect can really switch your brain around, and your performance goes with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think having that reconnection to where you've come from as well. You know, like every sports person starts playing because they love it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes professionalism, elitism within sport, you can sometimes lose that a little bit, or it kind of gets pushed down, and especially when there's a lot of pressure to maybe make the team, be selected to be selected for the Olympics, etc., etc. There's only that focus on maybe the outcome, the result, and at that point the love sometimes goes, and that's where I think the behaviour can start to change as well. So I always used to love Ronaldinho, because he just played with a smile the whole time. You see Messi pretty much all the time smiling, and when you're able to play at that level where you can see the joy coming out, the enjoyment, that's kind of taking you back to the kids, sort of what happened then. So maybe having that connection with where you started, that initial club or that trusted person, can almost help you reconnect with that as well.
Fascinating. We could talk about this all day.
Oh, totally. Get me talking about sport, I love it.
Yeah, we've just got into the flow.
Yeah.
You're actually starting up a podcast yourself.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about that.
I am.
It's exciting. I'm quite excited about it.
I'm quite excited about it too. It's called The Life After Sport Show. So it kind of does what it says on the tin. So it'll be similar to this, where we get to speak to guests and speak to retired athletes, sports people, finding out their story, how their retirement went, any challenges that went on, or what was going on in their minds during it, what they're doing now, and just kind of learning and just having some fun. So I'm very excited about getting that launched. So it should be within the next month and a half.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I think it's really interesting finding out a bit more. And the main reason I started this was through networking, talking to people and finding out what their story is. And everyone thinks they haven't really got an interesting story or background or life, and actually it's that makes me want to work with them rather than really what they do, because you get to find out a bit more about them, what drives them, and that's more compelling. And to understand more about an athlete through the career and what their thoughts were, and then afterwards, and how that affects it, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and quite often, like, we've seen a lot of their life maybe play out while they're competing, but we don't always see what goes on after that. And that can be just as interesting, and I know I'm going to learn so much from all of this as well. So I'm similar to you. I just want to be like that sponge that soaks it all up, and
amazing. If there are any people out there, I mean, I'd be surprised if there's any athletes or people listening, but if anyone was thinking about retirement, or they'd retired, or perhaps they're looking to improve their performance in general, how would they make contact with you? How would they find out where you are?
LinkedIn's always a great way. Anne Bach on there, so that's good. And the website will be up soon, which is awinningedgehub.com, because that's what O stands for, is a winning edge. Yeah, so those are the best ways.
Well, we'll put those links on all the episodes and social media goes out. I can't speak anymore. It's been a long week.
That's it. You're in the zone now. You're like your brain's gone.
Thanks so much for your time and coming on and pod.
Thank you.
Well,